So what would you say shaped you then? Like what, so if we're offering solutions, what shaped you? You talked about, you had some bad experiences after all the partying but I bet was there anybody or any person or anyone early on in life that you looked up to that really helped shape you?
Oh, I mean, um, I mean, in the last 15 years, it was really Dr. Mercola, I've learned more from Mercola than any other single source of information, and God bless him. And then, when I, about 2.5 or 3 years ago, when I realized or discovered, I'm like, oh, of course he's a freedom friend. It's just like, oh yeah, this guy's legit. Like I've always known he was legit, and of course he's a freedom friend. So yeah, I mean, Dr. McCullough in the last 15 years, and I mean, I guess before that, I had a few kind of aha moments in life, and one of them, trying to think of the order of when these things unfolded. I mean, one of them was I, when I was in graduate school, I had been a water commissioner for the city of Santa Cruz, and I had been on these various uh, city bodies doing environmental stuff. I chaired the city's green building working group at one point, we created the city's green building plan. Um, I mean, this was back when I kind of was thinking I might be a career bureaucrat, and I still believed in government in a way that I don't really believe in government now.
Right.
Since 20 plus years ago, 20-ish years ago. So the point is before I even finished graduate school, the county of Santa Cruz, um, I was kind of a known quantity, and they wanted their PhD on staff. So they kind of approached me and said, "Hey, if you apply for this job, you'll get it." So I applied for the job and I got it. So I got hired as a kind of high level planner, and they were kind of grooming me to be the head of that part of the county. So it was a whole unit of the county. So I wasn't going to be the head of the. It was a portion of the planning department. I wasn't. They weren't grooming me to be the head of the planning department, but to be the head of about a fourth of the planning department. It was the natural resources component of the planning department. So long story short, I get the job. I get my first job review, and I get an excellent job review. Things are going well. A buddy of mine is from graduate school. He's from India. He was a computer science major. He's getting married in India. So he invites a few of his graduate school buddies to his wedding. So I'm like, I can't pass up this opportunity to go to the 3-day Indian wedding. And I'd only been at the county for 9 months, so it wasn't guaranteed they were going to let me take a couple of weeks off, and go to India. But they let me go. So I go, and it was, India was amazing. It was a lot more multicultural than I expected. I thought like, oh yeah, an Indian's an Indian and they're all Hindu. Like no, there's like 100 different religions and 100 languages, and yeah, I mean it was great. It was a little bit hard as an American, and my God, by now, I mean it's hard to believe, but by now their population, since I've been there 20-ish years ago, their population is goddamn near doubled. I mean, it's shocking. Like when I was there, there were I think the population when I was there, without looking it up, it was probably like 750 million people, and now it's like 1.2 million, 2 billion or something. It's nearly doubled. But even when I was there, it was hard as an American to be with around so many people. There's just so many people everywhere, and I wasn't used to it. Like there's nowhere to get away from all the people, and that was. But anyway, it was great. The point of the story is things that shaped me. So I get back from my trip to India. I back a box of Indian sweets for the people at the office. The head of the planning department, who was not my boss, we barely met. He calls me into his office, sits me down, he looks me in the eye, and he says, and he was this happened to be this African American born again Christian guy. I don't know how somehow he got that job as the head of the planning department. And he looks at me and he says, "You can either quit or I'm going to fire you. Which one do you want?" I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I said, my only job review was excellent. Like, I don't get it. Like, what do you mean? And and apparently it was politics, but he used this pretense. I had hired 6 interns to do some GPS and GIS work, and the county planning department was so inept and notoriously slow. They I only had them for 8 or 10 weeks, 1 quarter at UCSC, and so I needed to get them going on their work, and the county didn't get them a login so they could log into a computer and do their work. And I'm couple weeks go by, and I'm like, Jesus, I've only got these guys for another 6 or 8 weeks. So I gave him my login, and so that it was politics. He didn't like. I think he didn't like that I was rocking the boat because I was bored at that job. So I kept asking for more. Hey, let's do this and let's do that. And I think he had this attitude of like, no one's good. If anyone's going to come up with new projects, it's going to be me. Who the hell do you think you are coming up with these new projects? Like you jump when I tell you to jump, and you ask how high. So anyway, I think that's what it was. I don't know to this day what it was all about. Long story short, he got fired, by the way, by the county board of supervisors a year later. Kind of funny. But when I lost that job, I mean, that was going to be my career. I was going to be a career bureaucrat. They were grooming me to take over my boss's position, who was going to retire in like a year or two. It was like a 3-minute bike ride from my house at the time. It was well paid. It was just, it was great, except that I was a little bored. And so it was kind of a catastrophe at the time. And getting back to your question, life events have shaped me. So I kind of made lemonade out of lemons at the time. And I said to myself, even though in the wake of this catastrophe, I said, no one's ever going to fire me again. I'm going to become financially independent, and I'm going to make more money than I would have made had I stayed and worked at that boring job. And I did it. And a couple of things that shaped that process for me were, of course, Robert Kiyosaki's classic book. And Robert Kiyosaki's a freedom friend, although I think he's a bit of a Trumpster. He's a bit wacky, but I do like his financial teachings. I don't need to throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Right.
I may not agree with everything Robert Kiyosaki preaches, but I reading his book Rich Dad Poor Dad, and around that time, I did the Landmark Forum, which blew my whole life open to possibilities.
Right.
And so those were a couple things that really shaped me. And then about a year later, a guy, Jesse Corn, who you might remember from men's groups from MKP, he suggested that I do this MKP thing. He said, just trust me. I was like, I don't know, what the hell is this? This new warrior training adventure, this weekend thing? What the hell is it? Tell me about it. He's like, no, I'm not going to tell you about it. You got to trust me. You got to go do it. So anyway, then I did the Warrior Weekend, the new Warrior Training Adventure and Mankind Project, and then I stayed in the men's group for 10 years after. But that was another formative thing for me. But it kind of just blew my whole life open to possibilities. And then and I gotta also admit that Santa Cruz, having grown up in the suburbs of LA, Santa Cruz kind of balanced me out. It brought out my inner hippie. It's just so freaking different here. The culture here is very, very different. I mean, it's ironic. LA, where I was growing up, it's very racially diverse, but it's not diverse at all socially. I mean, it's socioeconomically or culturally, I guess. Culturally, it's not diverse at all. Yeah, sure. My school had a lot of different races. Where I lived, we had like one African American. There were no real African American culture or population where I lived. Certainly there was in LA where I grew up. The point is, it was very racially diverse, but it was not culturally diverse at all. And to me, Santa Cruz is not very racially diverse, but it's much more culturally diverse than LA.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was great. It's been great living here, and it really, all the things, I got to experience living in Santa Cruz, all the parties and Burning Man and going to festivals and you know doing in, improv comedy, learning doing improv and the ecstatic dance community that I was a big part of for years. I'm not really so much now. I dance occasionally, but and then the polygamy, which isn't really my thing, but it's just the polygamous community in Santa Cruz, and then all the outdoorsy people, the people who are like almost I, I I've started looking into paganism recently because I realized after all these years that I I think paganism resonates more with me than any other spiritual or religious belief that I've come across. So I'm reading a book now on paganism. Like, oh yeah, this resonates. Like, yeah, this is kind of how I roll, and this is probably how my ancestors rolled before Christianity steamrolled them. Speaking of rolling, before Christianity crushed them all and burned all the witches. This is probably how my ancestors rolled, and how any to me, and this comes full circle to the biophilia and our sacred reciprocal relationship with the earth. Any sustainable society, any long-term sustainable culture that's going to survive is going to have that reciprocal relationship with the earth, that biophilia. And that's probably, that's the way a lot of pagans practice. It's earth centered.
For the viewer's sake, the book that really goes into this is Marion Zimmer Bradley's The Myths of Avalon. It goes into King Arthur and that realm, but what really the theme of that book is Christianity coming in and overpowering the pagan, the people who were living in with the land. And that was my big takeaway out of that series, that book series was it wasn't fact, but it wasn't fiction either. It was fictionalized fact, that book. So I like that they present that. And then to your point, then there's nothing wrong with spirituality. Just what's happened is from the pagan. And if you take all the ism out of paganism and you just say, how do I complete the circle of life, right? And you're one of those people. That's why I wanted you to be on here. Was you're an example of someone who's practicing the circle of life. Like Rudolf Steiner talked about this, and anyone who's in agriculture and really looking at the earth, like the earth recycles nitrogen, the earth recycles carbon, the earth recycles water, the earth recycles potassium. The earth, I've got all the PowerPoints up for this. Is what I'm teaching is the earth recycles phosphorus, and that what we call waste. I had an interview with Ken Foster on the same series, Karsten, and there's that book, Everything Poops, right? Everyone poops. Microbes, I really like freaking people out, but we're mostly, a poop organism because microbes have to poop inside our body and our own cells have to poop. And then so how we recycle our own microbial poop is a big part of, like, that's a waste stream, right? If you've got a lot of pathogens living in your body. And then one other thing to add on from the pagan quote perspective is there was a study, it was published in the USA Today in the 90s, and it was called the hygiene hypothesis. And I was an allergy kid, hay fever, really bad. And I loved to play in the weeds. And my mom kept trying to sterilize me with antibiotics and antibacterials. And,
oh, God.
And the hygiene hypothesis was the very thing. Mainstream study says the more sterile you live, the more autoimmune conditions are associated with that. And so my metaphor is our immune system needs target practice. It needs those little bugs and those little, if you don't get target practice and then a big bug comes along, your immune system is going to overreact, much like a cop sitting and drinking coffee all day that's not practicing. And then the cop's on 25 cups of coffee and a criminal comes along, he might overreact, right? Because people don't understand, we don't die of pathogens. We die of our immune system response to pathogens. It's well known in my field, like
it's a good distinction. Yeah.
Yeah, we die of our immune system overreaction because our immune system has gnarly tools like hydrogen peroxide and, oxidative damage to, there's all kinds of stuff that. So I love hearing you say that because it's kind of vulnerable in today's world to say, oh, paganism, but you throw out the ism and you just throw in like, go and study the cycles of life like Steiner did and Royal Lee did with standard process, and they were lovers of life. They were biophiliacs, right? They just wanted people to get it. Like Royal Lee, his dying statement on his bed, the founder of standard process said, I didn't make a dime in my life personally because every penny and every resource I made went back to the American people. That's why I'm up here, is to give back from these great people that kept me alive from a broken neck and my own stupidity, right? I mean, broken neck, concussions, injuries, all due to not understanding the cycles of life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how do people get in touch with you? Do you want to offer anything to people, or like what's your if we're gonna close on getting in touch with Karsten, or do you want to just remain, the guy that, like, do you want to help people? Do you want to just do circles? Do you want to work with people individually? Like, what's your joy in terms of sharing what you know with other people?
I mean, these days, what am I up to? I mean, these days, even though I'm heavily censored on social media, I like to just, you know, and they tell me that they're censoring me, and it's obvious that they're censoring me. But I don't want to just get on one of the alternate. I thought about I'll just get on one of these alternate platforms, but then I feel like, well, then I'm just preaching to the choir. Like I want to be on the mainstream platforms because I want, even if only two people see my posts these days because they censor the hell out of me, then those two, and I've gotten, by the way, to, this is so, I'm trying to answer your question. I'll get to your answer. But I got many private messages from people who never once liked or commented on any of my posts on social media, thanking me and telling me like, oh yeah, I read all your posts, they're great, thank you. And I'm like, what? Like, wow, I always thought, even if I'm only reaching one person, then that's enough. But like, oh well, apparently these other 15 or 20 people who reached out to me independently and without me, without any communication from me, apparently they're all looking at my stuff too, and they've never once commented or posted or liked. The point is, I mean, what am I up to these days? I mean, I'm just enjoying my life and trying to, set a good example. I host a sharing circle sometimes here at my house. Sometimes we have it elsewhere. I'm going to Honolulu next month. Probably stay there for a couple or 3 or 4 months because I love it there. You know why I love it there, and you know why I love it here? Because I can bike everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I love being able to bike everywhere. It so works for me, and it so works for the planet.